Welcome to Mindleapic, your quiet corner for drifting into sleep with the dullest tales from the past. Tonight, we unwind with the boring history of when people first started smoking weed, and a few more sleepy stories to ease you into dreams. If these gentle histories help you relax and nod off, hit that like button, subscribe for more nightly boredom, and drop a comment below on what forgotten fact you'd like us to murmur about next. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let the slow river of time carry you away. Imagine a world long before cities rose or wheels turned, a time when the earth was a vast, quiet blanket of green under endless skies. That is where our story begins, not with a bang, but with a soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Cannabis, that humble plant we know today as weed or marijuana, did not spring up overnight. No, it took its time, evolving slowly over millions of years, much like the steady breath of someone slipping toward sleep. Scientists tell us that cannabis first appeared around 28 million years ago, right there on the eastern edges of the Tibetan Plateau. Picture it. High mountains cloaked in mist, rivers carving lazy paths through stone, and in those fertile valleys, tiny seeds sprouting into plants with fan-like leaves that swayed gently in the breeze. This was no dramatic event, just nature doing its quiet work. Year after year, seed after seed, the plant spread slowly, adapting to the cold winds and thin air, its roots digging deep into the soil without fanfare. Over eons, it learned to thrive, producing flowers that held a secret resin, sticky and potent, but untouched by human hands for ages. Fast forward now, not in a rush, but in that unhurried way time passes when you're half dozing by a fireside. Humans entered the picture around 12,000 years ago, near the Altai Mountains in what we now call Central Asia. These early wanderers, our ancestors with simple tools and flickering campfires, came across cannabis growing wild among the grasses. They did not seek it out for thrills. Oh no, life was too plain for that. Instead, they gathered its seeds for food, tough and nutty, to fill empty bellies during long migrations. The fibers from its stalks became rough ropes and cloths, woven slowly by patient fingers under starlit skies. It was practical, boring even, the kind of daily chore that lulls the mind to rest. But when did the smoke begin? That is the gentle question we ponder tonight, letting it roll over us like a soft fog. The first hints come not from scrolls or stones, but from the earth itself, whispering secrets through its layers. Archaeologists, those quiet diggers of the past, have found traces in ancient graves, places where the dead rested undisturbed for millennia. In the high peaks of the Pamirs, along the ancient Silk Road where caravans once plodded slowly, they uncovered a cemetery from about 2,500 years ago. Wooden braziers, simple bowls for holding fire, lay buried with their owners, and inside, residues of charred plants clung like forgotten dreams. Chemical tests, done with care in modern labs, revealed it was cannabis, heated and inhaled, its vapors rising in thin, curling wisps to mingle with the mountain air. This was around 500 BCE, in a time when empires stirred faintly in the distance. But here, in these remote heights, life moved at a snail's pace. The people of the Jushi culture, as we name them now, lived in felt tents, herding sheep across endless steppes, their days filled with the monotony of wool spinning and meat drying. They burned the cannabis not in wild parties, but in rituals, perhaps to honor the departed, or simply to warm numb bones against the chill. The smoke would have been mild at first, earthy and herbal, filling the air with a scent like dried hay after rain. soothing rather than startling. Imagine sitting cross-legged by that brazier, the flames popping softly, the vapors drifting up to ease the weight of another unchanging day. Yet this was not the absolute beginning. No, the roots go deeper, like veins under skin. Historians point to even earlier whispers from the steppes of Central Asia, where nomads roamed with herds that lowed quietly at dusk. Herodotus, that old Greek scribe from the 5th century BCE, jotted down tales from travelers who had seen it firsthand. In his histories, he described the Scythians, those hardy folk of the Black Sea lands, throwing hemp seeds onto hot stones in their steam tents after funerals. The air grew thick with smoke, and they howled in what he called delight. But perhaps it was just the release of grief, exhaled slowly into the night. Herodotus wrote it plainly, without embellishment. They make a booth by fixing in the ground 3 sticks inclined against one another, and stretching around them woolen, felts the size of the opening left between the sticks. Inside, the heat built gradually, the smoke unfurling like a lazy river, carrying them to a hazy calm. These Scythians were not innovators. They borrowed from older ways, passed down from tribes who had watched cannabis grow wild for generations. Their lives were a rhythm of seasons, spring thaws revealing green shoots, summer suns ripening the buds, autumn harvests of seed and stalk, winter silences broken only by wind through dry reeds. Smoking was but one thread in that tapestry, used sparingly, for healing aches or quieting restless thoughts, much as we might sip tea before bed today. Let us drift eastward now, to the cradle of written words, where China slumbered under emperors whose names echo faintly. The oldest record we hold comes from the pen of Emperor Shen Nung, a figure from legend, wrapped in 2007, 127 BCE. He was no warrior king, but a gentle observer of plants, tasting roots and leaves to catalog their powers for his people. In his herbal, the pen Cao Qing, he noted cannabis as Ma, a plant of many uses. Its seeds for swelling eyes, its fibers for strong ropes, and its resin, when mixed with wine, for forgetting pain. But smoking? That came later, evolving from brews and poultices, as farmers in the Yellow River valleys experimented in the dim light of oil lamps. By the 1st millennium BCE, Chinese healers were inhaling vapors from heated cannabis, not in grand halls, but in simple huts, where the air hung heavy with herbal scents. Texts from the Warring States period, that long era of petty squabbles and slow sieges, mention muffin, the flowering tops burned to treat fluxes and fluxes of the body, calming fevers that burned like distant stars. It was medicinal, dull as a daily tonic, prescribed for the elderly whose joints creaked like old doors, or for soldiers returning from marches, their minds heavy with the sameness of camp life. Picture a village healer, gray-haired and stooped, grinding buds in a stone mortar under a thatched roof. The pestle grinds rhythmically, softly, releasing a faint, green aroma that blends with the steam from a kettle. Patients arrive at dusk, their footsteps muffled on dirt paths, seeking relief from the ordinary ills of living, a cough that lingers like morning mist, a ache that follows a day in the rice fields. The healer packs the mixture into a pipe of bamboo, lights it with a spark from flint, and passes it over, the smoke drawn in shallow breaths, each one loosening the knots of wakefulness. This practice spread quietly, like ripples on a still pond, influencing neighbors across borders that meant little to wandering traders. In ancient India, by 1000 BCE, The Vedas sang softly of bhang, cannabis mixed into drinks for sadhus, meditating in forest glades. But smoking pipes of clay emerged around the same time, used in temples where incense curled eternally. The air there was thick, layered with myrrh and sandalwood. The cannabis smoke a subtle undernote, helping priests intone chants that droned on for hours, lulling listeners into trance. Back in China, as dynasties rose and fell like breaths, Shang, Zhou, Qin, each blending into the next. The use deepened without drama. Hemp fields stretched across plains, rows upon rows of green sentinels swaying in unison, harvested by hands that moved methodically, blade through stalk, bundle after bundle. The excess tops, those resinous crowns, found their way to hearths, burned not for sport, but for easing the tedium of longevity. Emperor Wu of Han, in 100 BCE, sent explorers westward along silk paths, and with them went tales of smoking, customs from oasis towns where dates ripened, slowly, and camels chewed cud in shade. One such town, in the Tarim Basin, held braziers much like those in the Pamirs, their char speaking of nights when nomads gathered after storms, sharing pipes to recount the day's unchanging grays. The residue there, analyzed millennia later, showed high levels of THC, the compound that softens edges, though to them it was just the plant that quiets. Piece 177. No records boast of it. Instead, it hides in margins of tax ledgers, where farmers noted yields of ma alongside millet and soy. As we linger here, let us pause on a tangent, for history is full of such sleepy side paths. Hemp, the brother of marijuana, served empires without a murmur. In 200 BCE, China's armies marched with sails of hemp canvas, ropes that held firm through monsoons, shoes woven tough for endless drills. It was the unsung hero of expansion, boring in its reliability, much as cotton is to us now. Sailors on the Yangtze, poling barges loaded with grain, might light a pipe at shift's end, the smoke mingling with river mist, carrying away the ache of oars. Across the sea, in Mesopotamia, where ziggurats rose like half-remembered dreams, cannabis arrived via trade winds around 1000 BCE. Sumerian scribes, etching cuneiform on clay that baked hard in the sun, listed it among remedies for ghosts that haunted the ill. Vapors inhaled to dispel, shadows, plain as dust swept from thresholds. The Code of Hammurabi, that dry list of laws from 1700 BCE, touches not on smoke, but on hemp fields taxed yearly, their output feeding the machine of bureaucracy with threads and twine. In Egypt, by 1500 BCE, pharaohs like Ramses II ordered hemp for bowstrings and sails on Nile boats that glided silently under palms. Tomb paintings show workers harvesting, figures bent double in eternal labor, but whispers suggest priests burned buds in inner chambers, smoke veiling statues of Anubis, easing the transition to the afterlife's quiet fields. It was ritual, rote, repeated generation after generation, the kind of custom that numbs the mind to change. Now let us circle back to those Scythian tents, for they bridge east and west in a haze. Herodotus, traveling in 480 BCE, heard from Persian envoys of these barbarians who crawl out of their booths, stupefied with the fumes, but he noted it without judgment. Just a curious footnote in his vast, meandering text, Adi thans du have for. The Scythians themselves left no writings. Their story survives in gold plaques from frozen tombs, where tiny figures huddle over braziers, faces serene in metal. Pazyryk, in the Altai, yielded such artifacts from 500 BCE, horses buried with riders, saddles stuffed with hemp, pipes of horn tucked beside. These pipes were crude, stems hollowed from reeds, bowls carved shallow to hold a pinch. The user would tamp the weed, strike a spark from quartz, draw deep, the ember glowing like a lone firefly in twilight. The effect built slowly. First a warmth in chest, then limbs heavy as sand, thoughts unraveling like frayed rope. For nomads crossing steppes where blizzards howled monotone, it was a brief harbor, smoke curling from nostrils into frost-laced air. From there, the custom trickled southward, to the Greeks who pondered it philosophically in 200 BCE. Theophrastus, student of Aristotle, described hemp as a wild grower in Scythia, its smoke intoxicating like wine, but used sparingly, for thinkers valued clarity over blur. Roman legions, marching in 100 CE, carried hemp seed for bread, and soldiers in Gaul might share a pipe after rain-soaked drills, the vapor cutting chill like invisible wool. Yet in all this, smoking remained peripheral, a habit of margins, not centers. In Persia, Zoroastrian fires burned pure, but Hyoma brews included cannabis hints, inhaled in mountain rites, where echoes repeated chants endlessly. India's ascetics, by 500 BCE, puffed chillums in ashrams. Clay cones passed hand to hand, smoke threading through beards grizzled by years. To fill our night with more such whispers, consider the plant's dual life. Marijuana for mind, hemp for hand. In 1000 CE, Arab traders wove sails from it for dhows that rocked on Indian Ocean swells, while in back alleys of Baghdad, hashish, pressed resin, smoked in hookahs bubbled water, sessions stretching hours in lamplight debates on stars. But we must not rush. Let us dwell on China again, where Tang dynasty poets, in 700 CE, alluded to dragon's spittle from pipes, verses flowing languid as Yangtze currents. Li Bai, drunk on wine and verse, might have puffed occasionally, though his lines speak more of moon than mist. As part one draws to its close, remember, the smoke began not in revelry, but in necessity's quiet grip, easing pains, honoring dead, binding ropes for journeys unending. It spread like dew on grass, unnoticed, unhurried. Lie still now. Let these facts settle like dust on shelves, and as your breaths deepen, know that more parts await, each a pillow of prose for your slumbers. The echoes of Scythian tents fade into the night, like the last embers of a dying fire. Our sleepy journey turns southward, toward the vast, sun-baked plains of ancient India. Here, the Ganges flows slow and wide, carrying secrets on its muddy currents, and the Himalayas stand guard with snow-capped shoulders that never shift. Cannabis arrived in this land not on horseback, but perhaps on the wings of monsoon, wines, or the feet of traders who plodded dusty roads, their packs heavy with spices and seeds. It was around 2000 BCE, in the cradle of the Vedas, those ancient hymns chanted softly by priests under banyan trees, that the plant first whispered its name, ganja or bhang, a gift from the gods for weary souls. The Atharva Veda, one of the oldest texts, from 1500 BCE or so, lists cannabis among the 5, sacred plants that ease the body's burdens and quiet the mind's. Chatter.fd 67111. Imagine a rishi, a sage with tangled hair and earth-stained robes, sitting cross-legged on a riverbank at dawn. The air is thick with dew. Birds calling in low, monotonous tones. He crushes leaves between calloused palms, mixes them into a paste with milk and honey, not for smoke yet, but for a drink that seeps slowly into veins, unraveling worries like threads from a loom. This was Bang, sipped in rituals to honor Shiva, the destroyer who dances in eternal calm, his third eye half closed in perpetual doze. But smoking, that gentle art evolved later, as villages dotted the Indus Valley, their mud brick homes baking under relentless suns. By 1000 BCE, ascetics in forest hermitages fashioned chillums, simple clay pipes, conical and smooth, packed with dried buds gathered from wild hillsides. These sadhus, wanderers with begging bowls and staffs worn smooth from years of leaning, lit their pipes with embers from sacred fires, drawing the smoke deep into lungs parched by yogic breaths. The vapor rose in lazy spirals, blending with incense from sandalwood altars, carrying the user to visions of lotus ponds where time pooled, still and deep. 472A. It was no frenzy. Oh no. These were sessions of stillness, hours spent in ashrams where echoes of mantras droned on, the smoke softening edges until the self dissolved like sugar in warm ghee. Life in ancient India moved to the rhythm of seasons, monsoons that drummed steady on thatched roofs, harvests of rice bending golden in fields, festivals where lamps floated on rivers like fallen stars. Cannabis wove into this without ripple, used by healers to soothe fevers that lingered like afternoon haze, or by farmers after plowing, their backs bent under yokes of oxen that plodded unchanging paths. Pipes passed hand to hand in village squares at dusk, the glow of clay bowls casting faint shadows on faces lined by sun and toil. The effect was mild, a blanket of calm over the day's dull labors, mending nets, grinding grain, reciting genealogies that stretched back to forgotten kings. Let us linger here a moment, on the banks of the Yamuna, where Emperor Ashoka, in the 3rd century BCE, ruled with edicts carved on pillars that stood silent for centuries. A convert to Buddhism after bloody wars, he promoted herbs for peace, and cannabis found its place in monastic gardens, grown in neat rows beside ginger and turmeric. Monks, shaved heads gleaming in torchlight, might inhale vapors during midnight meditations, the smoke curling toward statues of the Buddha, whose serene smile promised escape from suffering's endless cycle. Texts from the Pali Canon, whispered in Pali tongues, hint at soma, a plant brew that included cannabis hints, but pipes emerged clearer in Gupta times, around 400 CE, when scholars in Nalanda filled libraries with scrolls on pharmacology, their nights fueled by herbal fumes that sharpened focus without haste. 603 Thokern. From these eastern groves, the custom drifted westward, crossing the Hindu Kush mountains where passes wound like sleepy serpents. Into Persia it seeped, that empire of golden domes and aqueducts, that hummed with the quiet industry of scribes copying laws onto parchment. By 600 BCE, under the Achaemenids, cannabis grew in royal gardens near Persepolis, its stalks harvested for ropes that lashed tribute wagons, but its buds reserved for Zoroastrian rites in fire temples, where flames leaped eternal. Priests, clad in white linens, burned resin on altars of stone, the smoke rising to Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, as offerings for purity. 25. 6. It was hauma, a sacred drink at first, but vapors joined it. inhaled to cleanse sins accumulated in the monotony of court duties, counting taxes, polishing swords, attending audiences where words flowed like honey, slow and sticky. Picture a magus, a priest with beard braided and eyes heavy-lidded, kneeling before a brazier in a chamber hung with tapestries of lions and lotuses. The air is cool, scented with myrrh, as he sprinkles powdered cannabis onto coals that glow without crackle. The fumes build gradually, a veil that softens the world's sharp angles, allowing prayers to unfurl like scrolls in still water. This was no excess. Zoroastrian texts warned against indulgence, prescribing it for visions that guided kings through decisions as routine as crop, rotations, or border patrols. Alexander the Great, invading in 330 BCE, encountered these customs in Bactria, his soldiers sampling pipes after marches, the smoke easing blisters and boredom, though he banned it later, calling it a Scythian vice unfit for Macedonians. As empires shifted like sands in the wind, Persian to Greek to Parthian, the habit persisted in back rooms of bazaars, where merchants haggled over silks in low murmurs. By the Sassanid era, around 200 CE, hashish appeared, resin pressed from buds and rolled into balls, smoked in water pipes that bubbled softly like distant streams. Travelers along caravan routes, camels swaying under loads of figs and frankincense, paused at oases to share hookahs. The hose passed slowly, each draw a pause in the endless trek. It calmed nerves frayed by sandstorms that howled monotone, or by the sameness of stars wheeling overhead night after night. Now let the tale turn to the eternal city, Rome, where aqueducts carried water in steady gurgles and forums, echoed with the drone of orators, reciting the same speeches. Cannabis reached Italy around the 1st century BCE, brought by legionaries from eastern campaigns, its seeds scattered in fields near the Tiber. Pliny the Elder, that encyclopedic uncle of history, wrote in his Naturalis, Historia of cannabis as a plant for strong chords and soothing ointments, but he noted vapors too, inhaled to numb toothaches that throbbed like forgotten drums. DC 8. In baths steaming with mineral springs, slaves might add buds to fumigators, the smoke mingling with steam to relax patrons reclining on marble, their conversations meandering through gossip as old as the hills. Dioscorides, a Greek physician serving Nero in 50 CE, catalogued it in De Materia Medica as an analgesic, recommending seeds burned for fluxes, the smoke drawn through reed tubes in dim apothecaries. Galen, 2 centuries later, delved deeper, observing in his writings that high doses brought delirium, a wandering mind like a boat adrift on calm seas. But he prescribed moderation for gladiators' wounds or senators, migraines from endless debates. Rome's streets, paved with stones worn smooth by sandals, hid such uses in insulae, tenement blocks where families crowded around braziers at evening, sharing pipes after days of milling grain or tanning hides. The smoke was earthy, laced with wine vapors, lulling them into sleep amid the city's ceaseless hum. Chariots rumbling, fountains trickling, owls hooting from rooftops. Yet in the provinces it bloomed freer. In Gaul, conquered lands where druids whispered in oak groves, cannabis grew wild by 200 CE, its pipes unearthed in villas with mosaics of vines and grapes. Soldiers stationed there, far from Rome's gaze, smoked to ease the chill of northern rains, the habit blending with local herbs into blends that smoldered low and long. Across the empire, From Britannia mists to Egyptian sands, it served quietly. Egyptian embalmers using resin in wrappings for mummies that slumbered eternal, or Berber traders in North Africa, inhaling fumes in tented markets where dates fermented slowly. Speaking of Africa, the trail grows fainter here, like footprints in shifting dunes, but whispers persist. By 500 BCE, Phoenician sailors docked at Carthaginian ports, carrying seeds from Levantine fields, where cannabis twined with figs in terraced gardens. In the Maghreb, Berber nomads adopted it around the 1st century CE, burning buds in clay lamps during Saharan crossings, the smoke a companion against thirst that clawed like a dull ache. Punic texts, etched on stele now crumbled, list it for easing labor pains in mud hut villages, vapors wafting through reed screens as women rocked cradles woven from its fibers. As Rome waned, like a candle guttering in drafty halls, the medieval world stirred awake in slow motion. Islamic scholars in Baghdad, by 800 CE, translated Galen's works into Arabic, preserving recipes for cannabis vapors in vast libraries, where lamps burned olive oil steadily. Avicenna, the prince of physicians in 1000 CE, described Kinub in his Canon of Medicine as a calmer of nerves, smoked in narghiles, hookahs of glass and brass that gurgled like contented streams. Caliphs in Damascus lounged on divans, hoses trailing like vines, debating poetry while smoke hazed the air with sweetness. 7. In Persia, the tale of the Hashashin unfolds around 1090 CE, though legends embroider it thick. These were Ismaili Fedayeen, devoted to the old man of the mountain, who trained in mountain fortresses amid cedars that sighed in wind. Not mere assassins, but gardeners of paradise visions. They smoked hashish, concentrated resin, to glimpse gardens promised in the afterlife, emerald and flowing with rivers of milk. But reality was plainer. Recruits prepared for missions with mild doses, the smoke steadying hands for daggers, then fading into the monotony of drills and prayers. 22 B41. Marco Polo, visiting later, spun yarns of drugged youths awakened in mock heavens. But truth was quieter. Hashish a tool for focus in a life of shadows and silences. From these peaks the custom spread to Moorish Spain by 1100 CE, where alchemists in Cordoba blended it with opium in pipes of ivory, vapors inhaled in hammams tiled with blues and golds. Mulberry trees shaded courtyards, silkworms chewing leaves in endless rhythm, while scholars pondered Aristotle under haze that blurred ink on pages. In India, meanwhile, Mughal emperors like Akbar, in 1556 CE, cultivated vast fields near Agra. Pipes of jade passed at durbars, where elephants trumpeted low, the smoke mingling with a tar of roses to soothe the weight of rule. Across the Islamic world, it fueled crafts without fanfare. In Samarkand, paper mills hummed from 1150 CE, hemp pulp beaten into sheets for Qurans copied by lamplight, workers pausing for puffs that eased the grind of pestles. Verse 23. In Ethiopia, by the 13th century, Coptic monks grew it in highland monasteries, burning buds in censers during vespers that chanted through fog-shrouded valleys, the smoke a bridge to saints' quiet realms. In Europe, as crusades plodded eastward, knights returned with tales and habits. By 1200 CE, in French monasteries, herbalists like Hildegard of Bingen noted hanf for vapors that quieted hysteria, pipes of wood hidden in scriptoria where monks illuminated, manuscripts stroke by stroke. The Black Death's shadow in 1447. CE saw it prescribed in plague-ridden towns, smoke fumigating homes where families huddled, breaths shallow and synced. Yet everywhere it remained a whisper. In African Sahel villages, where Tuareg veils fluttered in Harmattan winds, hashish balls traded for salt, smoked in thorn acacia shade to numb miles of camel trails. In Indian Deccan plateaus, by 1400 CE, Sufi dervishes whirled slowly to flutes, chillums shared in khankas, where walls echoed zikr, remembrance, of God in hypnotic loops. As part two settles like silt in a tranquil stream, these paths remind us. Smoking cannabis wandered not in conquest, but in the steady weave of daily breath, easing toil, honoring spirits, binding the ordinary into something soft. Rest now, let the sands shift under you, and await part three's murmur from farther shores, as the hookahs of Moorish Spain fade into the hush of forgotten courtyards, and the whirls of Sufi dervishes slow to a standstill. Our drowsy tale drifts across vast savannas and into the shadowed halls of medieval towers. Here, in the cradle of endless horizons, cannabis found new soils, not in conquest, but in the quiet tread of traders and the patient hand of farmers turning earth. Africa, that ancient continent of sun-warmed dust and star-strewn nights, welcomed the plant around 1,000 years ago, carried perhaps on Arab dhows that rocked gently on swells from the Horn to the Cape, or by Indian merchants whose caravans plodded, coastal paths lined with baobabs that stood like silent watchers. 1E23D. It was no grand arrival, just seeds tucked among spices, sprouting in red soils where rivers wound lazy courses through acacia groves. In eastern Africa, by the 11th century, the Swahili coast hummed, with the soft clatter of beads in markets where coral met monsoon air. Pipes, those humble inventions of stone and clay, had smoked other herbs for centuries. Perhaps datura or wild tobacco, since around 600 BCE, when ancestors fashioned the first hollows to draw vapors from embers in lakeside. Camps F23F7. But cannabis, called bangay, or daga, in tongues that rolled like distant thunder, slipped in quietly. Its leaves dried and crumbled into bowls carved from soapstone. Fishermen in Lamu, mending nets at ebb tide, might light one after hauls of tilapia, the smoke curling upward to mingle with salt breezes, easing the pull of ropes that chafed palms raw. It was practical, this new companion, numbing the ache of oars dipped hour after hour, or quieting the fret of storms that brewed offshore like unspoken worries. Further inland, in the Ethiopian highlands where plateaus stretched, like rumpled blankets under eternal skies, cannabis took root by the 14th century. Chronicles from Gondar, those yellowed pages in Ge'ez script, note it among remedies for fevers that clung like morning dew, burned in brass lamps during vigils in rock-hewn churches.023A03. Imagine a monk, robes frayed at hems from hill climbs, kneeling in the dim cool of Lalibela's tunnels, where crosses gleamed faint in candle flicker. He packs a pipe with buds gathered from terraced fields below, strikes a spark from flint nestled in his sash, and inhales slowly. The vapor warm as breath shared in prayer. The world softens then. Stone walls recede, chants from hidden choirs blend into a single droning hum. carrying him toward visions of arc-laden mountains bathed in dawn's pale light. It was not escape, but anchor, a thread to the divine, amid the sameness of fasts and genuflections. Southward now, across the Limpopo where Thornveld whispered in Harmattan winds, the Khoikhoi, those pastoral folk with herds that lowed at twilight, embraced it early, perhaps by the 15th century, introduced by Bantu migrants, whose footsteps echoed faint across grasslands. 1004 BC, they called it dacha, smoked in long-stemmed pipes of bone or wood, passed in circles around fires where embers popped like half-remembered dreams. Elders, seated on hides stretched taut, drew deep after days of kraal mending and milking, the smoke threading through beards grizzled by sun. It eased the joints worn from treks behind cattle that grazed unchanging pastures, or soothed minds heavy with the cycle of rains that came and went like breaths. Travelers from Europe, landing in Table Bay around 1650, marveled at this custom, noting in journals how Khoikhoi women wove baskets from its fibers by day, then shared pipes at night, vapors rising like ground mist over fynbos blooms. In the Sahel's belt, where Sahara sands met greener fringes, cannabis bloomed in Hausa city-states by the 13th century, traded down trans-Saharan routes where camel bells tinkled monotone. In Kano's mud-walled compounds, dyers steeped fibers in indigo vats that bubbled slow, pausing to puff from gourd pipes stuffed with resinous tops, the haze cutting the sting of lye that burned eyes. Smiths in Timbuktu forges, hammers falling rhythmic on anvils, might light one at quench, smoke blending with steam from cooling blades, carrying away the heat that seeped into bones. It was woven into the fabric of trade. Caravans from Tagaza, salt mines halted at oases, merchants bartering slabs for buds, then smoking in tented repose where stars wheeled slow overhead. Conversations meandering through prices as steady as Nile floods. Yet Africa's story holds shadows too, soft as twilight lengthening. Colonial hands, arriving with muskets and ledgers, taxed the plant first. British in the Gold Coast by 1800, Portuguese in Angola, turning fields into revenue streams where sharecroppers bent double under scythes, harvesting rows that stretched to horizons unbroken. Later, prohibitions fell like dusk, criminalizing what nomads had shared freely. But in hidden glades of Zulu hills or Congolese undergrowth, the pipes endured, smoldering low through nights of drumless vigils. Let us cross now to Europe's medieval heart, where cathedrals rose like frozen prayers and manors slumbered under thatch. Cannabis had lingered on fringes since Roman days, its hemp sails furled in harbors from Ostia to Londinium, but smoking revived in whispers from the east, carried by pilgrims and peddlers along roads pocked with ruts. A72. By the 9th century, in the Carolingian realms, where Charlemagne's edicts droned on parchment, monks in Aachen scriptoria grew it in cloister gardens, stalks twisted into cords for binding tomes, but buds occasionally burned in thuribles, vapors wafting through naves where Gregorian chants flowed endless. Hildegard of Bingen, that visionary abbess in 12th century Rhineland, penned in her Physica of Hanef, praising its seeds for easing fluxes and hinting at fumes inhaled to quiet melancholy humors that plagued herbalists grinding roots by rushlight. In France's Loire valleys, by the 13th century, a society of smokers gathered in shadowed inns, pipes of clay drawing hashish vapors. resin balls from Moorish envoys, mingled with wine in sessions that stretched like candle flames. Troubadours, lutes strung with hemp, might puff after serenades under castle walls, the smoke softening verses of unrequited sighs into murmurs lost on wind. It was discreet, this habit, hidden from inquisitors who prowled for heresy, but apothecaries in Paris guild halls prescribed it plainly for pains that throbbed, like distant bells, burned in braziers, for vapors that seeped into lungs, loosening grips of gout or stone. Across the Channel, in England's misty moors, Anglo-Saxons had tilled hemp fields since the 5th century, fibers for nets cast in Thames shallows, but smoking trickled in with Norman sails, around 1066, 29 D92. By the 14th century, in York's timbered halls, physicians like John of Gaddesden noted in his Rosa Medicinae the burning of cannabis, tops for earaches, smoke funneled through quills in dim chambers where patients reclined on straw pallets, peasants in Wessex commons, scything rye under leaden skies, shared pipes at harvest's end, the earthy draw cutting damp that settled in chests like unspoken griefs. D3 2007. In the Holy Roman Empire's sprawl, where electors droned alliances in torchlight chambers, cannabis served quietly. Bohemian weavers in 1400 used its oil for looms that clacked through nights, pausing for puffs that steadied hands frayed by shuttle. Alchemists in Prague attics, bubbling alembics over peat fires, added buds to elixirs, vapors tested in solitude to divine stars' slow arcs. Eadhudert A9F. Further south, in Italy's Renaissance, cradle, though medieval roots ran deep, Venetian traders imported hashish by 1200, smoked in Beccari where canals lapped foundations. The haze veiling talks of spices weighed on balances that tipped even. Yet in all these lands, it was the mendicant orders, Franciscans, wandering dust-choked paths, who carried it farthest, begging alms and herbs alike. In Spanish Reconquista frontiers, around 1300, they tended gardens where cannabis twined with olives, burning leaves in hermit cells to ease vigils that blurred into dawn. Smoke, rising like incense to crucifixes, hung crooked on walls. Now, a soft aside to the New World, though its shores knew not the plant in ancient times. Pre-Columbian peoples puffed tobacco in peace pipes across Andean ridges and Mesoamerican pyramids, vapors sacred as rain. But cannabis waited for sales from Iberia, seeds sown in Chilean valleys by 1545, growing tame beside maize that whispered in Andean winds. No wild kin roamed those continents. It was an old world traveler, arriving to bind ropes for galleons that groaned on trades. Its smoke later shared in haciendas where peons dozed under serapes, breaths sinking with cicada hums. In Africa's deeper folds, the Zulu in Natal Hills, by the 18th century, wove it into diviners' rites. Pipes of horn passed in Umuzi circles, smoke threading thatch to honor ancestors whose names echoed. Faint deb 6 in Moroccan Rif Mountains. Berbers tended terraced plots since Moorish days. Resin harvested sticky from frost-kissed buds, rolled and smoked in Kiev pipes during siestas where goats bleated monotone below. Europe's cloisters held more. In Scottish abbeys by 1500, hemp sails mended for herring boats, but priors inhaled, vapors for fluxes in infirmaries, where herbs hung drying like pendulums. FSU 18XF. The Black Death's pall in 1348, saw it fumigated in plague carts, rumbling cobbles, drivers drawing deep to steel against the wail of bells tolling unchanging. From these quiet corners, African plains where lions padded silent, European spires piercing fogs that clung like veils, the custom persisted, a thread in tapestries of toil and twilight. No thunder, just the steady exhale of life's unfolding plain. As Part 3 eases to rest, let these sands and stones settle in your thoughts and drift toward Part 4's murmur from colonial shores as the chants from European cloisters fade into the rustle of turning pages, and the savannas of Africa settle under moonlit silences. Our languid history sails now on wooden hulls, creaking against swells, toward the uncharted edges of colonial maps. The year is 1492, when Columbus's caravels nudged shores, fringed with mangroves that swayed like half-forgotten sighs. But cannabis did not leap aboard at once. No, it waited, patient as barnacles on keels, stowed in holds amid seeds of wheat and vines of grape, bound for soils that knew only tobacco's sharp bite and coca's quiet chew. Hemp came first, for practicality's dull embrace. Ropes to lash cannons, sails to catch trades that blew steady and slow, its fibers twisting under sailors, calloused hands as they scrubbed decks slick with spray. In the Caribbean's lazy isles, by 1500, Spanish encomenderos planted fields near Havana's thatched huts, rows of green stretching under palms that drooped in heat. The plant thrived in volcanic earth, its stalks harvested methodically, blade slicing stalk after stalk, bundled for shipment to Seville's rope walks where women spun threads in endless rhythm, but smoking, that trickled in later, with African hands chained below decks, bringing whispers of daga pipes from Angolan coasts, where embers glowed faint in slave ship shadows. In Jamaican hills by 1620, maroon communities, runaways hiding in cockpits thick with fern, grew wild patches, clay chillums fashioned from river clay, packed with buds that crackled soft over driftwood fires. The smoke rose thin, blending with night jasmine, easing the throb of brands seared into skin, or the weight of freedoms stolen like breaths in the dark. It was solace in sameness. Days of foraging yam, nights of vigils where stars pinned the sky unmoving. Further north, in Virginia's tobacco belts, Jamestown settlers scratched earth with hoes that rang dull on clay by 1611, when hemp mandates from King James echoed. Across the Atlantic, every colonist to sow an acre, for England's navy hungered for cordage to bind masts against gales. George Washington, at Mount Vernon in 1757, noted in ledgers the sowing of Indian hemp, though it was the tame sort. Fibers retted in ponds that mirrored willows weeping slow, smoking hid in margins. Indentured hands, after plowing furrows under relentless suns, might crumble wild buds, mistaken for native kin, into corncob pipes, the draw warm as hearthside tales of old sod. It numbed the sting of whips or the ache of fevers that swept plantations, like morning mists, leaving fields silent save for crows' low caws. In New England's rock-strewn farms, Puritans wove hemp into sacking for cod halls by 1630, but the herb's haze seeped through Quaker meetings in Pennsylvania. Around 1682, where William Penn's broad brims nodded over pipes passed discreetly, German settlers in Conestoga wagons, rumbling Schuylkill paths, carried seeds from Palatinate plots, smoking evenings by campfires where sparks drifted up like unspoken prayers. the vapor softening hymns sung in Deutsch accents thick as fog. Life there was a cycle etched deep. Dawn milkings, noon reapings, dusk mendings of plows that turned unchanging soil. Cannabis eased the Puritan. Grind. Vapors inhaled in barn lofts to quiet colic in babes or rheumatism in sires, its scent mingling with hay that sighed in wind. Southward, in Brazil's sugar barons' domains, Portuguese friars blessed cane fields by 1530, but cannabis sprouted in quilombos, hidden enclaves where escaped souls forged lives from forest leavings. By 1600, they called it liamba, pipes of gourd hollowed smooth, stuffed with leaves cured in shade, lit with flints struck patient as heartbeats. Smoke wove through canopies, where monkeys chattered monotone, carrying users to dreams of rivers unforded, far from lash and chain. In Bahia's candomblé groves, it blended with Orixa rites, vapors offered to Yemanja's waves that lapped eternal, calming the frenzy of harvests where scythes swung in unison dull. Across the Pacific, Spanish galleons from Manila bore it to Acapulco by 1565. Hemp for rigging that strained against monsoons, but buds found hands in Mexican highlands, where mestizos tended milpas of maize and maguey. By 1700, vaqueros on dusty trails rolled cigarros de mota, joints of corn, husk, puffed at siesta under, mesquite that drooped like weary lids, the haze-cutting glare that baked saddles dry. It was no revel, just a pause in patrols where hooves thudded even on baked clay, thoughts drifting like dust motes in sunbeams slanting low. In the Dutch East Indies, by 1600, clove plantations hummed with the scrape of beetle cutters, but cannabis arrived via Batavia's wharves, grown in terraced plots near Java's volcanoes that slumbered under ash veils. Coolies, backs bent under panniers of spice, shared bamboo pipes at trail's end, smoke threading mists that clung to rice paddies like half-shed skins. The VOC ledgers, those dry tomes of debit and credit, noted yields for fiber, but whispers in opium dens told of vapors mixed with poppy dreams, sessions stretching like shadows at equinox. Back in Europe's courts, the Enlightenment stirred faintly, like coals poked under kettles, but cannabis smoked on peripheries. In France's Versailles salons by 1720, courtiers in powdered wigs sampled assassin hash from Ottoman envoys, pipes of meerschaum bubbling in antechambers, where mirrors reflected flames, flickering low. Voltaire, quill scratching manifestos by candle, might have puffed occasionally, the haze blurring lines of reason into gentle curves, though he wrote more of coffee's bite. In London's coffee houses by 1750, apothecaries hawked bang tinctures, but pipes emerged in Covent Garden attics, actors drawing deep after rehearsals where lines droned, memorized rote. Napoleon's campaigns in Egypt, 1800, unearthed more. Soldiers in Rosetta Sands found hashish caches from Mamluk days, sharing in tents where Nile breezes sighed through canvas flaps. The smoke easing marches that plodded under pyramids' unchanging gaze. Berthollet, the chemist, noted its powers in journals bound leather stiff, prescribing vapors for dysentery that gripped guts like forgotten ropes. In the America's heart, Mexico's independence in 1821 saw it wild in Sierra Madre barrancas, peons harvesting alongside agave, distilling pulque that fermented slow in skins. Pipes of reed passed in cantinas where guitars strummed boleros soft as rain on tin, the draw a counter to tequila's fire. lulling patrons into slumps over scarred tables. In the United States young republic, hemp boomed under Jefferson's quill. Monticello fields sown in 1781, fibers for paper that bore the Declaration's ink. But smoking lurked in riverboat holds, where keelboatmen on Mississippi bends puffed grass, rolled tight, vapors drifting over waters that churned lazy under prows. By 1830, in New Orleans' French Quarter, immigrants from Crete peddled hash in absinthe dens, where lamps swung pendulous, casting pools of yellow on faces etched by fever seasons. Across the border, in Canada's maritime provinces, Acadian fishermen wove nets from it by 1760, but Mi'kmaq elders smoked blends with sumac in peace pipes carved walnut smooth, circles drawn around fires, where sparks mirrored auroras faint overhead. In Africa's colonial grip tightening, British botanists in Cape Town gardens catalogued cannabis sativa in 1808, Linnaeus's bins applied. But Boer trekkers on Great Trek Trails, 1835, carried seeds in ox wains, smoking evenings when veldt wines whispered through grass seas endless. In Gold Coast factories, slaves bound for ships shared daga in barracoons, smoke a veil against irons that clanked monotone. In India, under Company Raj, by 1780, East Indiamen unloaded pipes in Calcutta warehouses, but fields in Bengal sprawled vast, buds cured in attics where fans stirred air thick as syrup, exported as charas to London fogs, sepoys in barracks, muskets oiled nightly, puffed to ease parade ground blisters, the haze mingling with curry scents wafting from cook fires low. In Australia's penal colonies, convicts sowed hemp at Norfolk Island by 1788, fibers for chains that bound their own. But by 1820, wild escapes yielded buds smoked in bush huts where eucalyptus sighed eternal. Bushrangers on colonial fringes rolled leaves in bark, draws taken under gums that dripped slow, numbing the ride of stolen mares. Through these waves, Atlantic rollers, Pacific calms, Indian monsoons, the smoke persisted, a constant in flux, easing lashes, steadying helms, softening edicts read by lantern light. No fanfare, just the quiet unfurl of leaf to lung, binding eras like thread through cloth. As Part 4 drifts to harbor, let these hulls rock you gentle, and await Part 5's whisper from industrial dawns as the sails of colonial galleons furl into the gathering dusk of distant harbors, and the bush tracks of Australia fade under eucalyptus canopies heavy with dew. Our unhurried chronicle steps now into the clatter of factories and the hush of apothecary shelves, where steam whistles blew soft as sighs and gas lamps flickered steady over ledgers. The 19th century dawned slow, like mist lifting from Thames banks, and cannabis, that steadfast wanderer, found new roles not in revels, but in the grind of gears and the quiet. Consultations of healers whose coats smelled of ether and ink. Hemp fields sprawled across Lancashire plains by 1810, fibers spun into twine, for looms that thumped rhythmic through nights lit by whale oil, but its resinous kin smoked on in shadows. Pipes tucked in mill workers' aprons, drawn at brake bells to ease the throb of shuttles that flew unchanging. In Britain's industrial heart, Manchester's sooty spires pierced fogs that clung like woolen shawls, and by 1820, Irish immigrants in tenements crammed cheek by jowl shared ganja from clay bowls, vapors curling up stairwells where children coughed in unison dull. It cut the ache of looms that bent backs double, or the fog in lungs from coal dust that settled like unspoken regrets. Queen Victoria's physicians, in Windsor halls where clocks ticked even, prescribed tinctures of cannabis for menstrual cramps that gripped like winter winds. But pipes emerged in gentlemen's clubs off Pall Mall, where members in wing chairs puffed hash from Afghan imports, the haze veiling talks of railways snaking slow across moors. Sir William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, that Bengal surgeon returned in 1839, penned essays in the Lancet on its vapors for cholera fluxes, recommending inhalations in dim sick rooms where patients lay pale on linen, breaths sinking with the draw of reed stems. He had seen it in Calcutta bazaars, where hookahs bubbled low amid turmeric stalls, calming the grip of epidemics that swept Ganges banks like seasonal rains. Across the Channel, in Paris's labyrinth of boulevards gaslit faint, Baudelaire's circle, the Club des Hachishins gathered, by 1844 in salons hung with velvet that muffled laughter soft. Théophile Gautier described sessions where green paste dissolved in coffee, but pipes, too, of porcelain etched fine, passed hand to hand as opiate dreams unfolded lazy. It was literary, this haze, fueling verses that meandered like sand currents under bridges arched stone smooth, though Victor Hugo, exiled in Guernsey mists by 1852, stuck to ink, his quill scratching revolutions without puff. French pharmacopoeias by 1850 listed chanvre indien for neuralgias, burned in fumigators that hissed steam in clinics, where marble floors echoed footsteps even. In America's young sprawl, the Mexican-American War of 1846 spilled Grifo across borders, soldiers in cantinas south of the Rio Grande, rolling leaves in corn papers, the smoke a balm for dysentery that hollowed bellies on dusty marches. Back east, in Boston's ether domes, Oliver Wendell Holmes prescribed cannabis vapors by 1850, for insomnia that plagued poets scribbling by whale lamps, the draw-loosening tongues tied in rhyme. Harriet Beecher Stowe, at her Andover desk in 1852, might have sampled tinctures for nerves frayed by Uncle Tom's cabin drafts, but hemp fields in Kentucky bluegrass rolled vast for cordage, binding bales of cotton that steamed south on Mississippi packets, their paddles churning water to froth unchanging. By 1860, in San Francisco's gold rush fogs, Chinese laborers on Comstock rails puffed ma from long-stemmed pipes of ivory, vapors threading tent flaps where lanterns swung pendulous, easing the swing of picks that rang on quartz veins deep. It blended with opium in dens off DuPont Street, sessions stretching like shadows cast by clipper masts in harbor, where argosies from Bombay unloaded chests of charas sticky as dates. Mark Twain, plying riverboats in 1863, noted in letters the weed of frontier towns, rolled and lit at card tables where chips clinked monotone, the haze sharpening bluffs without haste. In the Ottoman lands, where sultans slumbered in Topkapi's honeycombed halls, hashish houses dotted Istanbul's back alleys by 1800, nargilas bubbling rosewater through amber mouths, patrons reclining on divans worn silk smooth, travelers like Mark Twain, docking in 1867, described the dreamy Turks in Innocents Abroad. Pipes passed in coffeehouses where backgammon dice rolled even, smoke veiling hagglings over carpets knotted thread by thread. It was daily, this custom, woven into the call to prayer that droned from minarets at dawn, calming the merchants, fret over caravans delayed by Anatolian snows that fell soft as ash. Africa's colonial veins pulsed fuller now. In Egypt's delta fields, British officers in 1882 puffed hash after Nile cruises, the vapor cutting the wine of mosquitoes that hummed eternal under mosquito nets strung loose. In South Africa's diamond pits, by 1870, Zulu diggers shared daga pipes at shift's end, clay bowls glowing faint amid claims staked wire taut, the draw-numbing blisters from scythes that sifted gravel hour on hour. Cecil Rhodes's compounds in Kimberley, fenced thorn-thick, hid such habits in bunkhouses where lanterns sputtered low, breaths heavy with earth's red dust. In India's princely states, under the Rajah's even hand, fields near Lahore yielded acres of bhang by 1850, cured in sheds where punkah fans stirred air thick with monsoon damp. Victoria's soldiers in Peshawar forts, by 1878, adopted chillums from Pathan scouts, smoke threading barracks where rifles oiled nightly, easing the march of boots on Khyber passes that wound unchanging. Rudyard Kipling, scribbling in Lahore clubs around 1882, alluded in verses to black hashish nights, though his pen favored whiskey, the haze a footnote to tales of elephants plodding jungle paths dim. Medicine's halls deepened the embrace. In 1860, the British Pharmacopoeia listed cannabis for pain, vapors recommended in asylums where inmates paced flagstones worn smooth, the smoke a veil over manias that whispered endless. American dispensatories by 1870 followed suit. Eli lily bottling extracts, but pipes lingered in frontier apothecaries, where settlers in Dakota sods drew, deep for neuralgias from prairie, wines that howled monotone. Queen Victoria herself, rumor soft as court whisper, used it for menstrual woes in 1890. Tinctures sipped in Balmoral mists, though pipes stayed to valets' quarters, hidden from corgis that snuffled carpets threadbare. In Russia's vast steppes, where czars ruled from Petersburg's iced spires, Cossacks smoked plan in samovars glow by 1800, buds gathered from Kyrgyz hills, the vapor warming throats parched by vodka toasts that clinked even. Tolstoy, at Yasnaya Polyana in 1869, might have noted it in War and Peace margins. Peasants puffing after scythes swung through rye seas golden, the haze softening epics of retreat that trudged snow-deep. Across the Pacific, in Japan's Meiji dawn of 1868, Dutch traders slipped seeds through Nagasaki gates, hemp for nets cast in inland sea calms, but buds smoked in geisha houses by 1890. Pipes of kiseru, slender, bamboo, drawing vapors that hazed shamisen strings plucked soft. It eased the shift from samurai codes to factory whistles that blew at Kobe docks, where kimonos folded neat beside boilers humming low. In Brazil's coffee fazendas, by 1880, emancipated hands grew liamba in caboclo clearings, joints rolled tobacco thick, puffed under ceiba trees that dripped latex slow, the smoke a counter to quinine's bite against malarial chills that shook like autumn leaves. Rio's samba circles, emerging faint, past pipes at carnival's edge, vapors mingling with rum breaths in streets cobbled uneven. Australia's wool sheds by 1870 clattered shears through merino fleece, but shearers in Queensland, barracks shared yarn dye from mullis, joints of newspaper, lit at smoko breaks, the draw cutting the itch of lanolin that clung like fog to skin. Bush poets like Banjo Patterson, riding Lachlan billabongs in 1890, versified the weed of drovers' camps, haze rising over campfires where Billy T brewed black. Through these decades, mills whirring, rails clicking, apothecaries measuring, the smoke wove steady, easing cogs of progress, softening ledger's ink, binding the era's hum into something bearable as breath. No clamor, just the gentle exhale of leaf-meeting lung, threading history's quiet folds. As Part 5 dims like a lantern wick trimmed low, let these machines' echoes lull you, and drift to Part 6's. Whisper from war-torn fields as the gas lamps of the 19th century dim into the faint glow of electric bulbs, humming steady in factory halls, and the apothecary's scales tip even under measured doses. Our tranquil tale steps now into the 20th century's measured march. Trenches dug deep, cities swelling like breaths held long, and laws etched slow on yellowed paper. Cannabis, that unassuming traveler through time's quiet corridors, lingered in the folds of daily life, its smoke curling from pipes tucked in, overcoats or rolled in papers, yellowed by tobacco's kin. No sudden flares here, just the even plod of progress laced with the earth's old resin, easing the weight of engines that chugged unchanging across prairies vast. In Europe's gathering clouds, before the Great War's thunder rolled faint in 1914, hemp fields blanketed Flanders lowlands, stalks swaying gentle under skies leaden with rain, their fibers twisted into sandbags, stacked neat against floods that lapped canal banks. British Tommies, shipped to Ypres mud by 1916, carried muggle, a slang soft as whispered orders, smuggled in kit bags from Indian depots, where sepoys had puffed, chillums in Punjab barracks under ceiling fans that stirred air thick with monsoon memory. In the trenches, where rats scurried monotone and shells whined distant, soldiers drew deep from corncob bowls, the vapor a thin blanket over chills that seeped from wool socks sodden eternal. It numbed the throb of frostbite gnawing toes like forgotten aches, or quieted nerves frayed by the tick of watches counting, hours to dawn patrols that sloshed through wire-tangled mire. Letters home, censored black with ink, hinted at herb tea shared in dugouts where candles guttered low. Faces shadowed same as the Some's scarred earth. Across the channel, French poilus in Verdun's red clay, by 1916, blended buds with Gauloises, in makings passed hand to hand, during lulls when rain drummed canvas steady. Pharmacists in Paris cellars by 1918 bottled extracts for shell shock that gripped like evening fog. Vapors prescribed in sanatoriums, where patients reclined on chaises facing windows fogged with sane mist. Armistice in 1918 brought no rush. Fields lay fallow, but pipes smoldered on in estaminets where widows poured pastis slow, the haze mingling with accordion wheezes that droned old refrains. In America's doughboy camps, by 1917, hemp ropes lashed supply crates on Hoboken docks, but loco weed trickled from border towns, rolled tight for nights in cantonments where bugles blew reveille even. Returning vets, by 1920, carried habits to speakeasies off Harlem's edges, where jazz notes bent lazy from horns polished brass dim, smoke threading air thick with gin breaths. The term marijuana slipped in soft around 1912, borrowed from Mexican, fields where braceros harvested, alongside cotton bowls white as clouds stalled, though some say it carried shadows of prejudice, a word chosen to stir fears of the border's dusty trails. In New Orleans' back alleys, by 1920, reefer men puffed in freight yards where boxcars creaked under loads of bananas ripening slow, the draw easing the sway of hips in dance halls where floors stuck with spilled hooch. Prohibition's dry spell, from 1920 to 1933, parched throats but not lungs. Bootleggers in Chicago cellars stashed buds beside barrels that gurgled mash. Pipes lit in idling Packards where chauffeurs waited under street lamps pooling yellow. Doctors in Bellevue wards, by 1925, noted cannabis for morphine abstinence. Vapors inhaled in dim exam rooms where charts hung limp. Calming tremors that shook like autumn leaves in wind, yet whispers grew. Harry Anslinger's Bureau, formed in 1930, tallied tales of reefer madness in reports typed double-spaced, linking smoke to jazz dives where saxophones wailed low, fueling laws that crept state by state. California in 1916, Texas by 1919, each edict a footnote in ledgers bound leather stiff. In the Weimar haze of Berlin by 1924, cabarets glowed red under marquees peeling paint, and intellectuals in cafes off Kurfürstendamm rolled hash from Turkish tins, the vapor-veiling debates on Kafka's sentences that looped endless. Josephine Baker's Review Girls, by 1925, might have shared joints backstage where mirrors fogged with powder puffs, easing the kick of choruses that thumped floors timber-worn. But as shadows lengthened, Nazis in 1933 banned it outright. Fields plowed under in Rhineland meadows, where tractors droned even, the plant tied to degenerate jazz that crackled from hidden radios. Across the Atlantic, in Mexico's Sierra Madre folds, by 1920, revolutionary peons grew moda in terraced plots beside bean vines climbing slow. Joints passed around campfires where guitars strummed corridos soft as riverstones. Pancho Villa's riders, though long dust by then, had puffed in their day. The smoke, a steady to tequila toasts under stars pinned vast. By 1937, the marijuana tax act stamped its seal in Washington halls where congressmen murmured over cigars, ash long, taxing transfers to choke the trade, though hemp endured for ropes on Liberty ships welding sparks faint. World War II's drumbeat, 1939, saw hemp sails furled on U-boat hunts in Biscay swells, but buds hid in troop ships' holds, American GIs in North Africa by 1942 sharing, joints in Casbah, alleys where dates thudded soft from palms. In Italy's olive groves by 1944, partisans in Abruzzo hills rolled leaves in newspaper, smoke threading mists that clung to Apennines like half-shed cloaks, numbing the wait for patrols that padded silent. Japanese internment camps in California dust, 1942, grew wild patches tended by hands, once farming strawberries row on row, pipes carved from soap slivers passed in barracks, where winds howled monotone through wire fences taut. Post-war Europe's rubble, by 1945, sprouted new fields. In Amsterdam's houseboats moored canal still. By 1950, hash from Moroccan Riff arrived via trawlers rocking gentle, smoked in cafes where bicycles leaned rust-flecked against gables leaning old. Beat poets in Paris left bank attics by 1949, like Ginsberg scribbling howl drafts by oil lamps sputtering, puffed tea from Algerian tins, the haze unfolding visions of supermarkets where fluorescent buzzed even. In London's Soho fogs, by 1954, mods in duffel coats shared spliffs outside. Flamingo clubs where skiffle guitars plucked strings slack, easing the chill of tube rides rumbling deep. In America's suburbs swelling bland, By 1950, Levittown lawns mowed weekly, but jazz basements in Kansas City hid reefer sessions where horns bent blue notes low, the smoke a counter to conformity's even tick. The Kefauver hearings, 1951. Grilled musicians like Billie Holiday in committee rooms paneled oak dark, her voice cracking soft on tales of reefers that dulled life's edges sharp. Yet medicine clung. In 1952, the U.S. Pharmacopoeia dropped it, but British docs prescribed for migraines in Harley Street. Consulting rooms where clocks chimed quarter hours precise. Across the Iron Curtain, in Soviet kolkhozes by 1947, hemp for twine-bound sheaves of wheat golden under Volga suns. But konoplaya, smoked in banaya steam where birch whisks slapped backs pink. Vapors mingling with vapor to loosen knots from tractor seats worn vinyl thin. In Prague's spring thaw, 1968, dissidents in cellars rolled joints from smuggled Polish tins. The draw, a quiet to typewriters clacking manifestos faint. In Jamaica's Blue Mountains by 1950, Rastafarian chalices, pipes of clay sacred, burned ganja in Nyabinghi, grounds where drums throbbed heartbeat slow. Smoke rising to jaw under breadfruit leaves dripping dew. Bob Marley, boy in Trenchtown shacks by 1956, learned the right from elders seated low. The haze weaving into reggae rhythms that lilted later from Kingston. Studios tapeworm. India's partition scars, 1947, saw fields in Uttar Pradesh stretch unchanged. Bhang lasses sipped in chai stalls where punkas swung lazy. But by 1960, hippies trekking Goa beaches rolled charas in chillums, carved horn smooth. Vapors threading palms that sighed in trade winds soft. Nehru's Delhi, by 1955, taxed it mild, but cops in khaki patrolled bazaars where merchants haggled over bolts of silk shimmering dull. Africa's decolonizing winds, by 1957 in Ghana, saw cocoa farmers in Ashanti groves puff daga from gourds etched tribal fine. The smoke easing the sway of machetes through pods cracking even. In South Africa's townships, by 1960, shebeens hid pipes under counters sticky with sorghum beer, draws taken to the thump of marimbas low, numbing the pass law's weight like chains oiled quiet. Through these years, trenches filling slow with mud, cities rebuilding brick by brick, laws layering thick as dust on shelves. The smoke persisted, a constant exhale in tempests that blew steady. Soothing shrapnel scars, veiling committee stares, binding the era's drone into drifts bearable as sleep. No crescendos, just the gentle curl of leaf to air, threading history's muted weave. As Part 6 settles like embers banked low, let these storms pass over you calm, and await Part 7's murmur from counterculture. Dawns, as the post-war suburbs settle into their even lawns mowed, weekly under sprinklers hissing soft, and the chalices of Jamaican hills send tendrils of smoke toward dawning skies. Our meandering murmur turns now to the 60s, gentle unrest, a time when folk guitars strummed, lazy chords in coffeehouses fogged with incense, and roads unspooled like forgotten ribbons toward horizons hazy with promise. Cannabis, that enduring whisper from ancient braziers, bloomed anew in these years, not in thunderclaps of change, but in the slow unfurl of leaves rolled paper thin, passed hand to hand in circles where feet tapped rhythms as steady as heartbeats. It was 1964 in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury, where Victorian row houses leaned crooked under eaves dripping paint. and Ken Kesey's merry pranksters painted their bus further in swirls of day-glow, stocking holds with Owsley's LSD tabs, but slipping grass joints between. The smoke a prelude to acid trips that meandered through. Golden Gate fogs like dreams half-remembered. Timothy Leary, that Harvard prof turned guru, preached turn on, tune in, drop out from Millbrook Estates woods in 1963, his pipe of carved briar drawing vapors from Afghan hash that crumbled sticky, urging seekers to expand minds without haste, each puff a step on paths that looped back to self like creeks carving stone. Across the bay, in Berkeley's People's Park dugouts by 1969, students planted plots amid chain-link fences rattled faint, tending buds that sprouted defiant under tear gas clouds drifting slow from National. Guard jeeps idling low. The smoke rose in protest puffs, mingling with chants that droned, "Power to the people," hour after hour, easing the sting of billy clubs that thudded even on picket lines stretching. Telegraph Avenue's curbs worn smooth. Janis Joplin, belting blues in Fillmore auditoriums by 1967, shared reefer backstage where amps hummed Stand By, the haze softening vocal cords raw from wails that echoed off posters' peeling curl. It was no frenzy. Life in the commune vans parked. Hate curbs moved to the tick of shared meals. Brown rice steaming in pots black from campfires, and joints rolled with papers from Amsterdam tins. The draw a bridge over generation gaps wide, as canyons carved by time. Europe caught the drift soft as channel breezes. In London's Carnaby Street stalls by 1966, mods swapped slim ties for beads strung loose, puffing dope from chillums bought in Soho head shops where lava lamps bubbled colors slow. The Beatles, fresh from Hamburg cellars, sampled it in Abbey Road studios by 1965. George Harrison's sitar, twanging under haze from Kashmir. Imports that arrived steamer slow, inspiring lyrics that looped Let It Be, like mantras chanted low. John Lennon, glasses fogged from puffs in Dakota apartments later, but in those swinging years. He and Yoko Ono rolled in Central Park clearings by 1969, smoke threading autumn leaves falling steady. A quiet to bed-ins, where sheets draped white and microphones caught breaths synced even. In Amsterdam's Canal Benz, by 1965, the Bulldog coffee shop opened doors, creaking wood-worn, shelves stocked with Nederweert, grown in attic plots under grow lamps, humming faint. Patrons reclining on stools scuffed from years, drawing from vaporizers that warmed air, gentle without burn. It was tolerance codified soft. Dutch laws by 1976 decriminalized possession under 5 grams, a policy etched in memos yellowed, allowing bikes to pedal past without glance, baskets laden with Gouda, wheels and tins of pollen-pressed hash that crumbled under thumbs, calloused from typewriters clacking verse. Back in America's heartland, the Woodstock mud of 1969 squelched, under bare feet, padding slow to stages where Hendrix bent strings guitar-weary, but fields nearby, farms in Bethel's rolling greens, hid wild hemp from Prohibition's old grip. Joints passed in tent flaps zipped half, the smoke a veil over rain that drummed canvas monotone. Vietnam's jungles, by 1968, saw GIs in a Shao Valley hooches share. Number 5, from Thai sticks, bartered from Montagnard, villagers whose longhouses smoked eternal, the vapor numbing the wait for patrols that splashed rice paddies ankle deep. Monsoons drumming helmets tinny, returning home, Vets in VA wards by 19. 72 puffed in group. Therapy circles where chairs scraped linoleum worn, easing flashbacks that replayed like films stuck on loops. Though Nixon's war on drugs, declared in 1971, layered penalties thick as binders on shelves. The Schaefer Commission's report in 1972 recommending decrim buried under memos stamped urgent. India's hippie trail, that dusty vein from Istanbul to Goa, pulsed by 1967. Overland buses rumbled Khyber passes where Pathan traders haggled Kharas balls black as dates. Travelers, backpackers in batik robes frayed at hems, bartering. Levis for lumps that packed chillums smooth. Smoke threading minarets that called prayer 5 times daily, unchanged. In Kathmandu's Tamil alleys, by 1968, freak streets sold temple balls resin-scraped from Shiva shrines high in Himalayas, misted eternal. Pipes of brass-etched lotus vine passed in guest houses where beds creaked bamboo, the haze unfolding visions of peaks snow-capped white. Steve McKenna's Freak Street, a warren of stalls by 1970, hummed with didgeridoo drones low. Joints rolled rice paper thin, shared over chai steaming clay cups, easing the trek's ache in calves, taut from mountain grades climbed slow. Africa's coastlines whispered too. In Morocco's Chefchaouen Medina, by 1969, Rif farmers terraced hillsides, steep with ganja plots irrigated, drip by drip from springs trickling stone. Hash-pressed Sieve fine exported to Europe holds that rocked Atlantic calm, but locals smoked keef in sepsi pipes of wood carved simple, draws taken in riads courtyarded quiet, vapors mingling with mint tea poured glass high. In Nigeria's Lagos markets, by 1970, Igbo traders bundled Igbo in palm fronds tied loose, pipes of calabash, hollowed, smooth-puffed in beer, parlors where generators hummed back up to power cuts that plunged streets black even. In Australia's sun-baked suburbs, by 1968, surfies in Bondi pavilions rolled mull from backyard, grows hidden fence high. The smoke, a counter to wetsuit chafes after swells, ridden dawn to dusk. Beaches raked smooth by council tractors rumbling early. Vietnam draft dodgers, fleeing to Byron Bay by 1970. Planted fields and rainforest clearings where cassowaries padded silent. Joints passed around didgeridoo circles where embers glowed peat red. The haze softening exiles frets like waves lapping shore unchanging. Medicine's slow wheel turned. In 1970, Raphael McCoolum in Jerusalem, labs isolated THC pure as snow, pipettes dripping solvent clear, paving paths for studies that droned on in journals bound stiff. British trials by 1974 for multiple sclerosis, spasms that gripped limbs like vines creeping wall. In California's Proposition 215, voted 1996, patients grew plots, doctor noted. Pipes allowed in hospice rooms where monitors beeped rhythm steady, easing chemo's grip that hollowed cheeks hollow. Yet laws labyrinthed deeper. Reagan's AEDs saw, just say. No campaigns, plastered billboards fade, but crackdowns layered federal schedules tight. Though states like Oregon decrimmed in 1973, a ripple in ponds still as glass. Clinton's 90s softened edges faint. Medical nods in 20 states by 2000. Counters wiped clean each dawn. Clerks weighing buds scale steady for customers. Queuing lines that curved sidewalk. Cracks A288F4. Picture a retiree, card in hand, selecting a strain called Blue Dream from glass cases lit soft. The smoke later drawn in living rooms where clocks ticked quarter hours, easing the creak of joints worn from Rocky Mountain hikes plodded slow. Washington followed suit that same November Eve, Seattle's evergreen haze deepening as stores like Uncle Ike's unlocked by 2014, parking lots filling with sedans idling low, patrons emerging bags rustling faint, fields in Yakima Valley, irrigated drip by drip from Columbia River bends, yielded harvests methodically sheared, trucks rumbling interstate, even to processing sheds where trimmers snipped leaves, hour on hour, the air thick with piney scent that clung to flannel shirts. It was no rush. Life in these new markets moved to the rhythm of audits filed quarterly, taxes funneled to schools where chalk scratched boards unchanging. By 2013, Uruguay stepped first as a nation. President Mujica signing Law 19,190. Fields in Artigas Department, terraced neat beside soy rows. Cooperatives tending plots under suns that baked soil red. Buds cured in barns, ventilated fan slow. Pharmacies in Montevideo dispensed grams weighed precise, users registering apps that pinged notifications soft. The smoke curling from balconies overlooking. Rio de la Plata swells that lapped eternal. It eased the sameness of office commutes on buses rumbling pothole deep, or quieted evenings in Periladas, where asados smoked low. Conversations meandering through gaucho tales old as the hills. Canada's turn came measured. 2018's Bill C-45. Passing Senate halls oak-paneled, provinces like Ontario rolling out stores by 2019, shelves stocked strains from British Columbia, greenhouses where misters hissed mist fine over trays of clones rooted even. In Toronto's Yonge Street crowds, LCBO offshoots turned green, clerks in vests scanning barcodes beep steady. Customers slipping packs into coats lined wool for winter walks that crunched snow crisp. Vancouver's compassion clubs, born 1990, evolved seamless. Vapor lounges paneled cedar warm. Hosting circles where elders shared stories of harvests from Okanagan orchards. The haze a bridge over decades layered thick. 5A6CX. Europe's patchwork quilted softer. In 2011, the Netherlands coffee shops, those canal-side havens since 1976, faced border strains from Belgium raids, but Amsterdam persisted. Red light windows glowing red under gables sagging old. Menus listing sativas and indicas priced euro even. Portugal's 2001 decriminal model rippled. Usage dipping steady as graphs in health reports bound stiff. Clinics in Lisbon offering talks murmured low over coffee's black. By 2018, Germany's medical green lit. Patients queuing. Apotheques tiled white for oils dripped sublingual slow. But recreational waited till 2024's partial lift. Possession under 25 grams. Allowed parks where benches sagged under oaks leafing. Green Daus 69F7F, Berlin's Görlitzer Park. By summer 2024, hummed with circles passing joints rolled rice paper thin. Smoke threading birches that whispered wind soft. Easing the hum of Ubon's rumbling subsurface even. Across the pond, U.S. states bloomed piecemeal. California's Proposition 215 in 1996 opened medical doors ajar, but 2016's 64 full legalized farms in Emerald Triangle Hills, Humboldt, Mendocino, Trinity. stretching vast under coastal fogs that rolled inland slow. Trimmers in cabins, wood-paneled clipping nugs, hourglass paste. DA. Los Angeles Venice Beach boardwalks. By 2018, sprouted pop-ups vending edibles chocolate melted, but smoke lingered in backyards fenced bamboo. Draws taken at sunset where waves lapped pilings worn. Nevada's Las Vegas Strip, 2017 green. Saw lounges off Fremont Street with ventilation humming quiet. Tourists in flip-flops reclining pods, leather soft. The vapor, a pause in slots chiming endless. Illinois joined 2019. Chicago's Wicker Park cafes, brewing lattes beside display cases fogged breath. Clerks advising strains for sleep that lulled like metronomes ticking low. By 2020, 20 states held recreational reigns. New York's Hudson Valley fields yielding to 2021's budget bill. Growers in greenhouses, glass-paneled misting clones under LEDs cycling blue-red, even .E26F4. Vermont's 2018 legislative nod. First without ballot, sowed home grows till 6 plants. Basements in Burlington. Row houses lit bloom faint. The smoke drifting up attics where beams creaked winter wind. Global tendrils spread unhurried. Australia's 2018 medical. Then 2021's ACT territory Rex. Canberra's parks allowing 2 plants tended pot deep. Leaves fanned gentle under sprinklers hissing dawn. New Zealand's 2019 referendum hedged no. But medical lingered. Pharmacies in Auckland dispensing capsules swallowed with teas herbal steeped. South Africa's 2019 Constitutional Court ruled private use free. Grows in Johannesburg townships fenced wire loose. Pipes of meerschaum carved heirloom passed in shebeens where Amabhodlela brewed. Sorghum sweet F4E-A3. In Asia's folds, Israel's 2019 medical boom. Kibbutzim in Negev sands irrigating drip fine. Labs in Tel Aviv pipetting extracts clear for MS patients reclining clinic cots. Vapors metered inhalers click steady. Thailand's 2022 rec lift. First in Southeast, saw Bangkok night markets vending buds beside pad thai sizzling low. Tourists in tuk-tuks puttering, alley deep drawing from vapes. Battery humming for Invice 6F1 DC. Malta's 2021 EU First. Clubs in Valletta, stonewalled hosting 20-member max. Joints shared circles, seated floor rug worn. Smoke veiling frescoes faded time. Africa's green wave crested. Lesotho's 2017 medical. Highland plateaus terraced steep with plots snowfrost kissed. Exports to Canada holds rocking Atlantic calm. Zimbabwe's 2018 nod. Farms in eastern highlands mist-veiled yielding fiber and flour. Workers in overalls scything rows blade dull. Morocco's 2021 bill eased riff grows for export. Cooperatives in Chefchaouen Medinas pressing hash sieve fine. Sebsi pipes bubbling water cool for locals lingering cafe stools. Wrought iron. 88. Latin America's paths converged. Mexico's 2019 Supreme Court ruling personal use free, though sales tangled till 2024's rec bill. Sinaloa Sierra's hiding grows under canopies dense. Vaqueros rolling cigarros mowed a thick at. Trails end where burros grazed grass short. Colombia's 2019 medical Andes slopes blooming under cloud forests dripping vine slow. Labs in Bogota centrifuging oils. Amber.A1F4 Brazil's 2024 medical push. Amazon fringes tentatively green, but smokes lingered favela corners where samba drums throbbed low. By 2025, the map greened fuller. U.S. tally at 24 recreational states. Sales topping 40 billion taxed steady. Dispensaries in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Snowbound stocking winter strains. Couch lock deep .4 yed 1e. Federally, Biden's 2022 pardons for priors, though schedules lingered eye-stiff. Whispers of rescheduling to the 3rd in 2024 FDA nods. Prevalence climbed gentle. North America at 15% past year use. Europe 4. Global 3.8. Graphs in WHO reports curving up slow as vines on trellis. D15, DC. Medicine deepened roots. 2020s. COVID trials for vapors, easing breath-labored ventilator hiss, or 2023's epilepsy drops dosed pipette drop. Edibles bloomed. Gummies, pectin, set in factories conveyor belt even. Vapes, ceramic coiled puffing clouds, flavor mint. Yet shadows soft. Illicit markets shrank 10% yearly, but cartels in Michoacan groves guarded plots, thorn fence. Trimmers paid peso daily. In daily drifts, it wove plain. Office workers in Toronto. High-rises vaping lunch break balcony lean. Or Berlin cyclists pedaling spree paths joint-clipped pocket deep. Festivals like High Times Cups in 2024. Denver arenas judged Bud's aroma. Faint, winners ribboned shelf gold. The smoke a toast to strains crossed careful. Through these gardens, fields misted, laws lettered, shops shelved. The smoke persisted, a constant curl in winds changing slow. Soothing poles weight, softening borders ink, binding globes greens into drifts bearable as dawn. No harvests rushed, just the gentle rise of bud to breath, murmuring history's quiet plots. As part 8 beds down like soil turned even, let these leaves rustle you still, and await part 9's whisper from tomorrow's haze. As the jars on, global shelves settle under fluorescent hums that buzz even through closing hours, and the fields of Lesotho plateaus stretch quiet under starlit veils. Our drowsy discourse drifts now into the 21st. Centuries later chapters, those measured pages where laboratories hum with the soft whir of centrifuges, and living rooms fill with the faint click of vaporizers, warming coils slow. Cannabis, that ancient leaf from Scythian tents and Indian ashrams, eases further into the weave of modern days, not with parades or proclamations, but in the steady drip of droppers dispensing oils amber clear, or in the quiet exhale of patients, reclining on clinic, cots where monitors beep rhythm low. By 2020, amid the world's wide hush from pandemic pauses, researchers in white coats starched crisp turned anew to its roots, sifting compounds like THC and CBD through filters fine as spider silk, uncovering paths to soothe ailments that lingered like morning fog over valleys unchanged. In Israel's sun-baked labs near Tel Aviv's sprawl, by 2021, scientists at Hebrew University greenhouses misted clones under LEDs, cycling blue and red in endless loops, breeding strains for epilepsy that gripped children in seizures, like half-remembered tremors. Picture AA, mother in a Haifa apartment, walls hung with family photos faded at edges, measuring drops from a tincture bottle etched glass smooth, the liquid pooling under. tongue to quiet storms that once shook cribs. Through nights starless, trials droned on, data logged in spreadsheets columned neat. Reductions in frequency by 40%, side effects mild as a summer breeze. Drowsiness that settled like dust on shelves. It was no miracle, just the patient work of pipettes and petri dishes, building on McCoolum's THC isolation from 1964, now layered with genomics that mapped genes like roads, unspooling plain across genomes vast. Across the ocean, in Colorado's boulder basements paneled pine, startups by 2022. Cultured tissue from meristem. Tips snipped scalpel precise. Propagating plants free of pests that crawled soil deep. Yields climbing, steady as vines. On trellises strung wire taut. No fields needed now. Just agar plates incubated warm at 25 degrees Celsius. Roots threading gel-like roots in earth forgotten. This biotech hush promised consistency. Buds uniform in potency. Harvested in flasks, glass-curved, easing the farmer's toil of seasons that turned wheel-like. Planting in spring thaws. Curing in autumn sheds where fans stirred air damp. In California's Central Valley, vast operations by 2023 shifted to vertical farms, stacked shelf-high in warehouses echoing faint. Misters, hissing intervals, timed clockwork. The air scented piney and constant. Workers in coveralls clipping nugs under lights that hummed without flicker. Medicine's embrace deepened without drama. The FDA's 2024 nod to rescheduling from schedule. I to the third unlocked doors ajar for studies funded federal slow. Trials in New York's Mount. Sinai corridors testing vapors for PTSD that replayed in vets. Dreams like films on loops. Worn 9-1-C-4E patients. Seated in armchairs upholstered neutral, drew from metered inhalers that clicked dose by dose, the mist cooling throats parched by talks that circled memories mud thick, chronic pain clinics in Michigan's Detroit sprawl by 2025, stocked topicals rubbed knuckle-deep into backs bent from assembly lines clanking even, balms infused with CBD that seeped skin slow, loosening knots tied decades deep from rivet guns gripped hour on hour, graphs in journals bound, glossy curved gentle, 30% fewer, opioids prescribed in states greenlit full, a shift as subtle as tides pulling sand even. Cultural threads wove quieter still. In 2020, amid lockdowns that stilled streets to whispers, home bakes bloomed. Brownies, fudged oven-warm in suburban ovens, preheated steady, shared over Zoom screens, pixel-soft with family faces framed distant. Stigma faded like ink on pages yellowed. Surveys by 2022 showed 68% of Americans viewing it neutral, a plant no longer shadowed, but shelved beside chamomile in wellness aisles where clerks, restocked jars, dawn-dusted. A469 in Toronto's Kensington Market stalls by 2023. Artists etched pipes from cherrywood lathe turned, bowls carved shallow for draws that lingered low, sold to tourists wandering cobblestones uneven. The smoke a nod to 60s trails now etched in tattoos, faded arm-deep. In Europe's cafes, Amsterdam's 2024 tolerance held firm. Houseboats moored canal still stocking edibles. Gummy set in factories conveyor paced. Flavors berry mild for evenings spent on decks where ducks quacked monotone. Berlin's Kreuzberg parks, under linden trees leafing green, hosted circles by 2025, where elders passed vapes, battery-charged, conversations meandering, through recipes for salves that soothed garden aches from hoes dug soil loose. It blended with daily rhythms, cyclists pedaling, spree paths with pouches pocket-tucked, pausing benches sagging to puff clouds vapor thin, the haze a pause in commutes that ticked train-scheduled. Africa's narratives unfolded plain. In Lesotho's mountain hamlets, by 2022, women's cooperatives tended plots terraced steep, scissors snipping buds sun-dried on mats woven grass-tight. Exports to Canada holds that rocked swells gentle, funding schools where chalk scratched slates unchanging. 8.F2. In Ghana's Accra suburbs, 2024's medical pilot saw clinics dispense oils for HIV, symptoms that dragged like afternoon heat. Patients reclining cots screened mosquito net. The drops, a steady to antiretrovirals swallowed pill by pill. Latin America's soils whispered on. Mexico's 2024 rec sales, though tangled in cartel shadows soft as dusk lengthening, opened tienditas in Guadalajara plazas tiled ochre, clerks weighing grams, scale-balanced for locals lingering after market halls of papaya ripening slow. In Argentina's Buenos Aires tangos, by 2025, musicians in milongas dim-lit rolled joints tobacco-blended, the smoke threading accordions wheezing low, easing the sway of hips that moved steps memorized rote. Even in Asia's measured folds, Thailand's 2023 dispensaries dotted Bangkok's Chatuchak sprawl, shelves stocked sativas for tourists, reclining pod chairs wicker woven, the vapor a counter to jet lag that clung like humidity thick. Japan's 2024 medical trials in Osaka, labs tested extracts for nausea post-chemo, vials filled pipette drop in hoods ventilated hum, patients in yukata robes sipping infusions herbal steeped. Yet Health's watch stayed vigilant. CDC's 2020-25 strategy mapped surveillance soft, tracking use via apps that pinged surveys anonymous, graphs curving use among youth steady at 12%. Interventions murmured. In schools where posters hung, bulletin faded. CS49A. NIDA's 2025 roadmap charted risks plain. Better tests for impairment behind wheels that turned highway even. Public service spots aired radio low on drives home through rains pattering steady. In hearths worldwide, it settled domestic. 2024's home grows in Oregon. Basements lit bloom faint. Pots watered timer drip. Yields jarred shelf deep for winter's snowbound. Families in Vancouver, patios strung lights twinkling, low shared edibles after dinners of salmon-grilled cedar plank. The calm a blanket over. Talks that looped school days wrote. Through these healings, labs whirring, cultures curving, hearths humming, the smoke persists, a gentle thread in lives unfolding even. Soothing pains etched deep, veiling stigmas thin, binding days drifts into something soft as breath drawn slow. No endings sharp, just the quiet curl of leaf to air, murmuring history's later leaves. As Part 9 dims like a hearth banked ember low, let these shadows wrap you calm, and await Part 10's final whisper from timeless greens as the hearths of 2025 flicker low with the soft pop of embers, settling into ash, and the lab's pipettes drip their final measures for the night. Hour-long, languid journey through the haze of history draws now to its quiet close. A final murmur where ancient braziers blend seamless with modern jars, and the plant that rustled leaves on Tibetan slopes 28. Million years past, whispers still in gardens, tended hand by hand. Cannabis, that unhurried companion from Pamir graves and Scythian tents, persists not in climaxes or crescendos, but in the steady rhythm of breaths drawn deep across millennia. Its smoke a constant curl through seasons that turn wheel-like, unchanging. We have wandered its paths, from the slow unfurl of seeds in Central Asian winds, to the measured votes in ballot boxes stamped ink faint. But here, in this last part, let us linger on the threads that bind it all, the sleepy side paths where it weaves into the fabric of forgetting, easing the ordinary aches of living without a stir. Picture, if you will, a farmer in rural China, 2026 perhaps, under the Han Dynasty's distant echo, though dynasties now are names in textbooks yellowed on shelves. He kneels in a yellow river valley plot, fingers parting soil damp from morning dew, planting ma seeds in rows as straight as the furrows his grandfather tilled. With oxen that plodded even, the plant rises green and patient, leaves fanning wide to catch the sun's slant, its fibers later twisted into ropes for fishing nets cast into ponds that mirror willows drooping low. But at dusk, when the air cools to a hush broken only by crickets chirping monotone, he packs dried buds into a bamboo pipe, strikes a match that flares brief as a firefly's glow, and draws slow, the vapor warm in chest, loosening the day's weight from shoulders rounded by hoes dug deep. It is no different from Emperor Shen Nung's tastings in 2727 BCE, or the healers of the warring states grinding resin under thatched roofs where rain drummed steady. The effect settles like silt in a still stream. Thoughts drifting lazy, pains that throbbed like half-remembered drums fading to echoes. Faint, sleep claiming him on a mat woven from the very stalks he harvested blade by blade. Drift eastward with me now, to India's timeless glades, where the Ganges flows wide and muddied, carrying offerings of marigold petals that float aimless. In a Varanasi ghat by 2027, a sadhu sits cross-legged on stone steps worn smooth by pilgrims, bare feet padding dawn to dusk, his chillum packed with ganja gathered from Himalayan foothills misted eternal. He lights it with embers from a sacred fire that burns without cease, the smoke rising in spirals thin to mingle with incense curling from brass lamps etched lotus fine. Around him, bathers dip shoulders deep in waters that lap gentle, rinsing sins accumulated in the sameness of market days, haggling over spices, weighed scale-balanced, or mending saris thread by thread under banyan canopies that sigh wind-soft. The sadhu passes the pipe to a wandering mendicant, their draws synced like breaths in meditation, the haze softening edges until the self dissolves into the river's flow, much as the Vedas chanted of Bhang 1500 BCE, a plant to quiet the body's fluxes and the mind's endless wander. Life here moves to the drone of temple bells tolling hours unchanging, festivals where lamps float riverbound like fallen stars, and cannabis a thread in the tapestry, used in Ayurvedic pastes, rubbed elbow-deep for joints that creak like old doors, or sipped in Thandai brews spiced. Cardamom warm for weddings that stretch days into nights of dances stepped rote. Let the tale turn westward, across the Hindu Kush, where passes wind like sleepy serpents under peaks, snow-capped white, to Persia's golden sands, where bazaars hum with the low, murmur of hagglers over silks shimmering dull. In a Tehran tea house by 2028, merchants recline on cushions threadbare from years, hookahs bubbling water through hoses coiled brass, packed with hashish, pressed from buds grown in oasis, groves irrigated drip by drip from qanats, carved stone deep. The vapor unfurls sweet and thick, laced with apple tobacco that smolders low, carrying conversations through tales of caravans that plodded, silk roads 2,000 years past, camels swaying under loads of figs fermenting slow. It eases the ache of saddles that chafed thighs on trails dust-choked, or the fret of tariffs tallied ledger plain, much as Zoroastrian priests burned resin on altars in 600 BCE, fumes rising to Ahura Mazda in rites repeated generation after generation. Now, in these modern stalls where fans stir air heavy with saffron, it serves the same. A pause for elders whose beards grizzle white, drawing deep to recall uncles who puffed in Sassanid courts around 200 CE, the smoke a veil over memories that loop like prayers intoned low. Cross the Mediterranean swells that rock boats gentle, to Africa's vast savannas where acacias stand sentinel under skies endless blue. In a Maasai Nkang by 2029, elders gather around a fire pit ringed stone smooth, pipes of gourd hollowed patient passed hand to hand, stuffed with daga leaves dried in thornbush shade. The smoke threads the night air, blending with the low of cattle penned close, their bells tinkling faint as stars wheel overhead. It numbs the throb of herding days, where staffs prodded flanks across plains, grass knee-high, or soothes minds heavy with the cycle of droughts that parch earth crack wide. This custom echoes the Khoikhoi circles 1,500 years ago, when dacha burned in bone bowls after kraal mendings, vapors a companion to stars that pinned the Cape's horizons unmoving. Life persists in rhythms etched deep. Milkings at dawn when mists lift slow, beadwork strung afternoon long under thorn awnings, and at twilight, the pipe a ritual shared, binding generations like fibers twisted rope strong. Now, let us sail Atlantic rollers to the Americas' quilted coasts, where colonial fields long plowed under bloom again in backyards fenced picket neat. In a Seattle suburb 2030, a veteran sits on a porch swing, creaking chain rust, vaporizer in hand warming coils ceramic smooth, drawing mist-flavored pine from a cartridge-filled clinic clear. The haze settles lungs like a blanket wool-thick, easing the ghost pains of shrapnel scars from trenches mud-deep in 1916, or the restlessness of nights when flashbacks play real slow. It mirrors the doughboy's muggle in Ypres dugouts, or the GI's tie sticks in a Shao Hooch's 1968, a steady through storms that blew century spanning. Around him, the neighborhood hums evening routine. Sprinklers hissing lawns mowed weekly, barbecues smoking ribs low, and cannabis now a neighborly nod. Edibles shared at block, parties where grills sizzle even, or topicals rubbed temple deep for migraines that throb like distant shells. In Europe's cobbled hearts, London's Hampstead. Heath, by 2031, sees walkers pause under oaks leafing green, joints rolled rice paper thin, clipped from tins pocket deep, the smoke drifting paths mulched soft. It softens the jog of knees worn from tube stairs descended daily, or quiets the chatter of commutes that tick train scheduled, echoing the troubadour's puffs in 13th century Loire inns, vapors veiling versus side unrequited, Amsterdam's coffee shops, gables leaning old, Serve sativas steamed gentle by 2032. Patrons on stools scuffed lingering over lattes foam-capped. The Haze a bridge to Beat Poets' Attics, 1949, where tea unfolded Howl drafts ink fresh. Australia's Outback tracks, red dust swirling faint. Host Didgeridoo circles 2033. Mullahs past mullahs. Joints newspaper rolled, under gums dripping slow. The draw cutting the vastness that swallows sound. It binds to Banjo Patterson's Drovers 1900. Haze rising campfires Billy Black, easing miles of mares stolen trod. Even in Asia's island chains, Japan's Kyoto temples. 2034, sea monks in gardens raked gravel even. Puff Kiseru stems bamboo slender. Vapors mingling with cherry blossoms falling petal soft. It calms the zazen, sits hour-long. Cushions tatami worn, much as Meiji geishas eased shamisen plucks 1890, a thread through eras folded crisp. And so, as we circle back to those first braziers in Pamir Heights 500 BCE, where Jushi folk burned buds in wooden bowls for rites departed, the circle closes without seam. Cannabis endures in the boring beauty of persistence. Fields sown seed by seed, pipes lit spark by spark, smokes exhaled breath by breath, easing the eternal sameness of sunrises, goldening horizons plain. From Herodotus's Scythian booths to Uruguay's co-ops 2013, from Ashoka's edicts 3rd century BCE to Biden's pardons 2022, it whispers one truth. History is not storms, but the quiet river carrying us all toward sleep. Lie still now, dear listener, as these tales settle like dew on grass untouched. The origins of the smoke, those first curls from embers 2,500 years cold, blend into tomorrow's gardens where hands still part soil patient. May this boredom blanket you deep. Dreams weaving greens endless. Thank you for wandering with Mindleapic. Sweet slumbers await.